Hey everybody, my name is Randy. With me are Reed, Esteban, Beto, and John, and we are starting a little group called Hammers and Dice. We are some Horus Heresy gamers based in Southern California in the Los Angeles area, and we are really just trying to grow the Horus Heresy community. We just ran an event last month at Odyssey Games in Pasadena. We had, what was it, 10 players uh, at the event. And it was really exciting and it was a lot of fun. And we're hoping to do more events in the future. But I think what we also want to do is kind of have this podcast, talk up some heresy, and then also maybe in the future start doing some battle reports, some other content, and just kind of see where it goes from there. Uh, so I think we'll just dive in and kind of we'll each talk a little bit about what we love about heresy, how we got into it, and then we'll move on and to talk about some more heresy goodness. So let's see, Reed, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Reed. I have been playing, I guess, since 2013 has when I got into Warhammer in general. My roommate from college taught me all about it, and as I started like growing my, my knowledge of it, I started looking into playing my first Space Marine chapter, like everyone kind of does. I'd played Eldar, Tyranids, and then I was like, okay, the Imperium, it's time. And I started looking at their model range, and I found on Forge World there were these amazing Terminators for the Salamanders that were obviously the Fire Drakes. And I realized, wait, these guys have way better rules and just like a way, they have two wounds. Like that was a big thing. There was only one wound for Terminators in seventh edition when I started. So I was like, I'm going to play Heresy. And I realized really quickly how much I loved the setting where you could kind of really customize each chapter, once again, at the Legion at the point, so that they could kind of grow and expand and be everything that you want. So now I'm many years into it, and I play Blood Angels now. I play the Talons of the Emperor. I have a large Custodes army, and I'm slowly growing my sisters. I'm trying to get them up to 3K by the end of this year. And then I'm starting my first trader force, which is Night Lords. So that's really my experience. I have a couple of nights here and there. I'm trying to do a lot of other things, but really also what I love is the setting and our emphasis on the narrative aspect because I'm really big into terrain and like, setting the scene. So recently I've been 3D printing a lot of terrain as well. So that's a lot of what I love in the hobby. So um, I don't know if you need anything else from me, but I think that's a lot of
That was great.
it.
All right, Esteban, how about you?
All right, so I'm Esteban. I feel like I've personally been in the hobby way too long for my personal health because I started back when I was like 9, 10 years old by happenstance. I walked into a Hobby Lobby USA. That's an old name, probably very few of us remember. And it was like the old third edition Dark Angels tactical box with the metal plasma cannon and metal sergeant. That was like my first kit and my favorite kit. And just to let you know how bad I was at this, little 10, 11-year-old me thought, Elmer's glue, this is sufficient, right? To my 10-year-old's credit, I did manage to get them stick long enough to actually get some paint on them before they fell apart, but enough. But yeah, no, just been playing the game for too long is a bit of my opinion, is just because I've seen everything from third since, so I've gotten a taste of every little bit of Warhammer 40K and 30K as it started. Never really got into 30K proper, only because at the time I was just a high school student when English, or sorry, just out of high school starting college. Didn't really have any money for that first edition of Heresy, but it was always there in the back of my mind as I always, saw blogs on the internet for it. Always wanted to start it. And then about a year before Heresy 2.0 dropped, I was finally ready to actually be a independent person and actually be out of my parents' place and everything. So I was like, oh, maybe I should actually do some of the things I want to do. And one of them was start a Horus Heresy army. So I got the Resin Day. I was like, okay, I love this model was released. I really wanted one. That's the first model. I'm gonna make it Dark Angels, and I built it, painted it. Was like, cool. Now I just got to save up for another couple months so I can buy another kit of Marines. And then Heresy 2.0 was announced, and I was like, oh, I don't have to go bankrupt or wait 3 years to build an army. I could do this in a year, and that's what I did. But yeah, no, just enjoying the hobby just because I like building and painting. I like gaming as well, but for me, it's like building. I never mind painting. It's just building plastic. It's like a very bad addiction for me. I like to get my hands dirty with super glue.
Right. The glue fingers are a really real,
It's
issue for our hobby.
oh yes, oh yes,
Oh
it
yeah.
is.
Beto, how about you?
Hey, I'm Beto. Yeah, similar stuff to everyone else. I was just a kid. Fourth edition, the Battle of McCrag had come out. I was like probably like
Yeah.
9 or 10, and that was it, man. I remember being like, well, between that and the Fire Warrior game that came out back then, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I gotta have it. So I was super into the hobby throughout like my teenage years, and like most players in 40K kind of fell off for a couple of years, and then like years and years passed, and I remember thinking like, well, I would watch battle reports all online. I was like, you know what? I think it's time. Like after seventh edition, I wasn't like Primaris wasn't really my thing, so I was like, maybe I'll take a little break and stuff. And I was like, but I still loved watching battle reports online, and the only ones I understood after seventh was done were all the Horus Heresy ones. So I was like, I already love the books. I mean, and I finally am financially free enough to like invest in an army. So just before 2.0 dropped, I bought like the Battle of Cal kit, and then perfect timing because Age of Darkness came out like 3 months later. So I was set.
All right, John, you're up.
Hey guys, I'm John. I've been playing Heresy since like 1.0. I started Warhammer when I was like 12, like 2006, I think. High school got kind of busy, so I dipped out of the game. But when I got back in, I started reading the novels, mainly the Horus Heresy novels, and I realized like, oh, there's a game for it. So I tried to hop into that, and man, I've built a lot of legions since then. I have a 3,000 point Thousand Sons army, Word Bearers that I just finished. I have Blood Angels and Mechanicum. I had a Custodes army at 1.2, but I sold that off. So yeah, I've been playing Heresy for a while, and it's going back to the novel thing. I think for me, Heresy, it's the chance to just play out those battles from the books. I feel like 40K is very, even in a narrative sense, very expansive. There's like a million worlds, lots of factions, and all that going on. But in Heresy, it's like, oh, I could put Jago Sevatar on the table, and he could fight like Horswain as models. Like that's super cool to me, seeing like those characters come in. But yeah, that's Heresy for me, seeing the books come to life in the tabletop.
Yeah, for sure. And then for me too, I mean, I got started in 40K in like the late 90s in third edition when I was in middle school. I had a friend who like actually brought in some of his Space Marines for like a show and tell. And I was like, what are those? Tell me
It's a cool
more.
kid.
Yeah. And like I remember like my first army was like accidentally Dark Eldar. I was like because they still had those mail order catalogs and it didn't have pictures. So I was literally just like picked like a Hellion. And I was like, I have no idea what this is, but I got ordered it and it was like one of like the metal like flyers with like, the dual blades. And I was like, this is so cool. And I had no idea what it was. And this was the days before they were called Drukari. They just called them Dark Eldar at the time. Um, and like that was my first army. And then I got more into the lore and I was like everybody else, I was like, I'm a Space Marines fanboy, I think. So like I transitioned from Dark Eldar into Space Marines and was just like always obsessed with the lore. I was like reading the books, like the Spaceballs novels and like Eisenhorn and like all like pretty much anything Dan Abnett wrote is also amazing. Um, and then yeah, like I played through high school and then college kind of stopped. And but I kept reading the books, especially the Heresy books. That was always my favorite part of it, was like the Horus Heresy, like lore and the novels. And like so even like the next decade, essentially, like I didn't play it all, but like every time there was a new Heresy book, like I immediately bought it and read it right away and was like always super into the lore. And I remember being like really excited when like the first like Primarch model came out, like when the Engron model came out, I was like, oh fuck, they're finally doing like the Primarchs. I was so excited, but I was like, oh, that's a lot of money. I'm like, I don't know that I want to spend that on this, and like I'm not really playing right now. So like I never like I every time there's a new model, I always kind of like would take a peek. but never like really got back into it
That's how
until
it always starts, you know.
That's how they get you,
yeah.
man.
And then like the last few years and like COVID, and I was like, I got a lot of free time on my hands, and I was like, I kind of want to get back into it. So I initially started with Kill Team. So I was like, all right, like I could just paint up like 10 models and see how that goes. Um, and then so like I built up a Kill Team force, and I was like, I enjoyed painting models again, but I didn't particularly love the format of the game. Like I went to one event and I was like really put off by like how crazy some of the players were about like, you know, having these laser pointers and being like, oh, I see like a fraction of your base here, or like a fraction of my base is in cover, so now my whole model is in cover. And I was like, what? So like that kind of turned me off a bit. And then around that time was when they announced like Heresy 2.0 was coming out. And I actually did the same things, but I bought like a Mark of Calth box, and I was like, all right, like I have no idea what the rules are gonna be, but like I'm sure gonna be using some tactical marines. So I started out with like Ultramarines because Gilliman's my boy. And like built up an Ultramarines force, and then once the rules came out, it was kind of just slowly building the force, trying to figure out what worked, and then went from that into building Thousand Suns, and then I just finished like a 3,000 point Luna Wolves list, which I've been very excited about. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my heresy story. And I feel like that's a good segue into like I know we've all just kind of touched into this a little bit, but just talking about like what it is about heresy, because obviously there's a lot of war games. Like I mean, there's the GW war games, but then there's also war games from a whole bunch of different companies. So I'm like, I'm always curious with like other people, like why heresy in particular, and also like trying to get new people into the community, like convincing them like why they should be doing heresy instead of other games. Um, and I think we've all kind of said it like to some degree. I think the lore is a big part, right? Like if you
Hmm.
like
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's just so like the story of the heresy is just so epic, and it's like like that how you have that like light versus dark, but also at the same time it's like nobody's really like a hero.
Right.
um
Hmm.
like you just have this like really interesting like everybody kind of sucks, but some of them are really cool, and everybody has a
Shades of
different
suck.
person. Exactly, like and then you have those people that you love to hate, and you have those people that like you like just constantly root for. And like
Mhm.
I always find it so interesting because like I'm like whenever someone's like a word bearer's player, I'm like, but what's wrong with you? Like, how
Hey,
could you do
who
that?
hurt you when you were younger that you were like, hey, this is a good idea?
Who hurt? It's just
You guys are just mad because the word bears won. Just saying.
They kind of did, though. Really, they got what they wanted.
They did, and it breaks my heart. Uh, so I mean, obviously, like that's a big part, and I think you know it might make it a little tricky bringing in random people cold who aren't from 40K, because I think coming into this without knowing the lore, you might be a little bit like, well, what is this?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, people have been asking, like, where do you start with the books and stuff like that? I kind of do want to say, like, heresy probably isn't the point to begin because, like, it feels a lot richer, actually, like, kind of when you know the ending. Like, everyone, when the End and the Death was coming out, it was crazy how hyped the community was because, like, we technically all knew the ending, at the end of the
Hmm.
day, but like how we got there was so important to all of us that like I was ready. Just I reread all the Siege of Terra just to come up, and like I timed it so well. I finished the part End of the Death part 2 on my way back from LVO. So and like that the third one came out that weekend, so like I was just like so happy to then just like roll into it and have it all as one continuous story. And like we felt that as a community, getting like kind of that payoff that we once again we knew the answer to a lot of it, but it's like who survived, it's like who kind of made it, who's going to maybe play a part in the reorganization of the empire. And I haven't played a lot of the other mini gaming stuff, but at the end of the day, like also like heresy consumes so much of my thought process because it's so enticing, and also I can't afford another one, really. Like I don't want to.
Oh, I'm in that same
yeah.
boat, Reed. To be honest, I kind of want to provide the opposite view. I would say that Heresy is a great, great game, but honestly, it doesn't make it necessarily the best. I luckily am part of a group of friends where we all kind of own a game system and we all introduce it. So somebody has all the Legion stuff, someone has all this stuff. So I've been able to play a lot of games, and while I will say I love Heresy for its format, not necessarily the greatest game ever, but yes, that lore just consumes such a huge portion of everything. I mean, it's just fun reading everything 40K, 30K, all that. All the lore from those two settings is just so deep. It's like reading Tolkien almost. It's like, there's just layers upon layers upon layers. That is what makes it fun to read. But to be honestly, I think what makes Heresy so enticing is the fact that at the end of the day, it's a beer and pretzels game. You go with your friends, you grab a beer, you grab drinks, whatever, and you just have fun for a few hours.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's what really differentiates it from a lot of other games, like especially 40K these days. Part of I mean, there's a few reasons why like I didn't want to get into 40K again. Like one of them is like there's too many armies, and I feel like if you come in as a Space Marine player, everybody knows how the Space Marines play. But if you're playing against, someone who's a Gene Stealer cult, you have no idea what their rules are. And like I feel like you're at a real disadvantage. Whereas in Heresy, you like I mean, yeah, there's Mechanicum and there's Solar Ox, but for the most part, like you have a pretty good idea of what your opponent is going to be bringing. And like there's enough different flavor where you're not seeing the same thing every time, but you're not like coming to an event and being like, I have no idea what the rules are for 90% of the people I'm playing. Like
Right.
you kind of have a little bit more of like, oh, like I know what's going on. Like I generally know what these other guys are bringing, and you don't get caught flat-footed being like, oh wait, you can do that? Like that's crazy. Um, and that also comes down to that like competitiveness too. Like I think 40K has been pushed in this direction of being really competitive and this win at all costs. Like I'm going to bring 10 versions of this one squad because it's the best unit and there's no rule that says I can't. Which in Heresy, I mean, if you want to get down to it, there's some really broken rules and like you can really take advantage of the system and just make a crap list that will just destroy everybody. But I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is that not everybody. I mean, there's some people you roll up to a game and you're like, "Are you serious?" But for the
We're
most
looking
part,
at you, Fury of the Ancients. We're looking at you.
Yeah.
No, but honestly, I haven't actually seen anyone play that Rite of War the entirety of 2.0 because you're right. I think like a lot of our community is like kind of like censoring itself or like, at least policing ourselves for the most part.
I was actually say I actually did manage to play Fear of the Ancients at LVO.
Oh, really?
Yes, and here's the thing: the guy was very self-moderating because he only took the one HQ dreadnought and the two compulsory HQ dreadnoughts, and no other dreadnoughts. Everything else is just
Huh.
a regular list. So it's like, oh hey, this is just three dreadnoughts in a 2K
Yeah,
list.
right.
It's one extra dreadnought, and it was not oppressive at all. I think that's the trick to it. It's just, hey, don't be a dick about it. It's self-regulation. We all like to win, but come on, guys.
yeah,
Right.
We have
Yeah.
brains. We understand
Yeah.
what it's like to be smashed in. No one wants to do a full smash in. We want to enjoy the game.
Yeah.
But once
But
again, though, Fear of the Ancient is a cool Rite of War, like not knocking it. It's just like allowing your opponent, like it's just not cool to bring it to a tournament setting, I think, in that way. Like obviously your opponent did it great, like in that kind of methodology, but like, playing a full kind of Fury of the Ancient list, like you kind of have to like at least give your opponent some notification. Like it's like cool to play those kind of really themed lists that you would
yeah,
see in Heresy. But it's just kind of like once again that kind of self-moderation of like allowing your opponent that either knowledge or it is self-moderation in that way.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, this is kind of a hot take, but I play a lot of, as you guys make fun of me, a lot of my friends make fun of me. I play like a million mini games. Right now I'm playing 30K, Old World, and Star Wars Legion, which I play with Beta once in a while. And hot take, but Heresy as a game isn't very good in my opinion. But because the lore is so good and the models are so cool, and it just draws all of that in, it's a fun experience. But I think if the Heresy rule set was using 40K models, which was kind of 7th edition and 6th edition, the game was kind of eh. So I think the system is very flawed, but thankfully we have a community, not just here in Los Angeles, but all across the world where people understand the flaws of the rule system and self-regulate, as we talked about, to kind of shore in those holes, like not taking Fury of the Ancients full dreadnoughts list, not spamming heavy support squads, right? Or taking like just spamming the most OP unit. There's that kind of understanding that, yeah, like this, you could do this, but you shouldn't, because the goal is a fun game, not a win at all costs kind of game.
Yeah. I think also we like, as a Heresy community, most people don't start with Heresy. I mean, I don't know what the new 40K players are doing, but most people come from 40K. It almost feels like we're like a refuge for 40K like burnouts. So it's like who play Heresy love the modeling, love the painting aspect. It's pretty rare at this point that I play against an army that isn't like 90% painted versus like I've seen like 40K events where I'm like, I'd be lucky to have a army that's fully painted, where I'm like, the people who are playing Heresy have just been playing 40K for so long and they just want like the true love of the game. And like, I agree with John, like it's not the greatest game format. I've definitely played better games, but seeing my army on the table, like that's going to be cooler than any other game format. And like loving the lore and seeing like these models, it's the best ones, like
Yeah.
I love, but like nothing's going to compare to being like, yeah, I want to see like white scars on the battlefield that I painted like meticulously. And I'm like, okay, here they are, after like reading all about them, knowing all the lore.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And it's
against
also
another fully painted army too.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
So-
such
With
an
like kind of the right
aesthetic kind of.
setting. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
it's such an aesthetic treat to seeing two fully painted armies. Like for example, like an Ultramarines. Like I see Beto and Alan play. You got a fully painted Ultramarines army and a full painted Word Bears army, and they're just these two blobs of like red power armored dudes in the battlefield. It just looks really cool, even though they're just all power armored dudes. But just the with the fully painted aspect, and then you have your unique units on each side. It's such a treat to see a Heresy game, regardless of what's actually going on in game, right?
yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I do think like there's a way with Heresy to be, I don't know if the competitive is the right word, but to be more like, I think there's room in Heresy to have different levels of play, right? Like I think you have the players who are just in it for the fluff and they're like, I'm building this army based on this Esteban 5 list, and like this is super thematic and fun, and I don't care if I win or lose, but like this is like I think just a cool list, and like I love that. But I also think you can like there's space in Heresy as well for being like, yeah, I'm not going to take 3 heavy support squads with las cannons, but like you can come up with creative ways to make lists a little bit tougher without being super cheese about it, which I think is it allows you the space to do that. And like, and again, it's like who you're playing against. You kind of want to, where we get into that self-regulation, you have to know who your opponent is. And you almost have to tailor your list a little bit to your opponent and be like, what kind of game are we playing today? Are we just like, we're bringing Primarchs and they're just going to bash into each other and it's just going to be silly and goofy, or it's going to be like, this is going to be a more tactical game. Like, when Heresy first started, that was how Beto and I met. We just like randomly met at like the Warhammer Cafe, and like we were both starting out our armies, and we were building our lists to beat each other. So
Yeah.
we kept making our lists like more and more aggressive and being like, oh, how are you going to counter this? Oh, I'm going to build this. And it got to the point where we finally had these really strong lists. And like this was early days when we didn't really know anybody else. And then we like started playing other people and we're like, oh, we need to tone our lists down a lot.
Yeah.
Like this is way too strong.
Randy, I remember when I played my Talons of the Emperor against you, and you just like stomped me. Like I was like, I need to up my game right now.
But for me, it was like I created like a shitty list, like because it was like I had a 10-man las cannon squad, a 10-man Volkite squad. I had some Fulmintaris in there before they nerfed them. I had a 10-man suzerain squad with a telepathy librarian. Like
Yes,
at the
very
time,
shitty, very not
like
effective.
I didn't realize how shitty I was being because I was playing against Beto's Imperial Fists like re-roll every save 20 times lists. So you needed as much firepower as possible to kill one man. So it was like going from that to playing a normal list. I was like, oh shit, like this is not like an okay list to bring to regular games, you know?
So, hearing all this, I think there's one thing we can all agree on. It's that what makes Heresy great isn't the game itself, it's actually the community, people who play it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I really just like enjoy the community and kind of seeing what everyone's up to at the same time. And you see everyone's like kind of passion and care that goes into every kind of army or model that they make. It's kind of up to everyone's individual standard and level, but people put a lot of their heart and soul into it, and you love seeing those people that come up with something so creative. Like I remember at LVO there's a guy who did like the Revenant Legion, like they did some like like some of the Great Crusade Blood Angels that were just like I've never seen anyone do that before, and like what a cool idea of like
That's really cool.
a small part of the heresy that no one talks about. It's just cool stuff like that. We're it's funny, like we're historical fictional game players, at the end of the day. It's like that's actually kind of a better terminology for us, is historical gamers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not too far off, honestly. I mean, I still lament myself because whenever I paint my Dark Angels, I get into this mood of I'm like trying to do heraldry, and I'm like, is that a Dark Angel herald? And I have to start like spend 20 minutes on I'm painting one dude. Like, does that make sense? Does that look correct? And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? I could just I just need to slap on some swords and some colors and it'll look Dark Angels enough. I should really stop panicking over this and then spend another 20 minutes looking at Dark Angels heraldry.
I think back to what you're saying too about like 40K and like why we come from it. It's just like at the end of the day, I think people love Space Marines, right? Like
yes,
all pretend that 40K else, but it actually is just Space Marines battling Space Marines, and like all the other factions, awesome. I'm really glad we have Gene Sealer Cult and Tau and all the crazy other ones. But come on, it's actually Space Marines, right? Like we're all here for the Space Marines. Like
no, you're right. You're right.
Absolutely.
For the record, I used to work for Games Workshop, and I remember the stat. It's like 90% of Warhammer players have owned a Space Marine at some point. Some crazy number.
I was like, I believe that sounds wildly inaccurate. That should be 99% of players, not 90%. Really. Not 90%. No.
Yeah, 99% have owned Space Marines, and 9% have lied about owning Space Marines.
Right. There we go.
It's kind of more of a question of when you become a Space Marine player rather than if you are.
Yeah. It's 90% with a nut plus or minus 9% error leaning towards the plus.
Yeah. I mean, this is a good like transition point to talk about. I think at each episode we'll try to think of some like new and interesting, heresy topics to bring up. But I think this week, because we just had the pre-order come up for the new Beta Garmon campaign book yesterday as of the recording, it'll probably be a few days from now when we actually release the episode. But we've there've been a few reviews that have come out of the campaign book that kind of have shown off, and also a few leaks too, I think, that have shown off most of what's in there. And I think it would be interesting to kind of discuss how we feel about that, and not necessarily go too in depth into like the actual rules, because I think at this point there's already multiple videos out there that are literally just going, page by page of what's in it, but just how we think that it's going to affect the game moving forward. So I mean, the big thing for us, I think, I mean, there's some Solar Aux stuff in there that I think is really interesting. I guess we can touch on that first. Like, I'm actually kind of into the Legion Auxilia, like that.
It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, like I had no plans to do any sort of Solar Aux at all, but I'm like, oh, I can like get
some might be pretty good now.
Some buffs to my Ultramarines by bringing some Solar Aux to my lists. Like, okay.
Are we going to start seeing Solar Aux in like most Marine forces now is kind of my question. Because like I personally, I think I'm going to play Militia instead. Like I think I'm going to do a Militia army instead of a Solar Aux. But because like really fundamentally they have like very similar like rights of war technically, the marches of war. I can't remember what it is for the militia right now. But they at the end of the day, like we going to start seeing like a solar auxilia detachment coming with most space marines now because of, like you said, like Sons of Horus get a +2 charge if they kill something in a squad. Like, I mean, imagine that on like your big Justarin unit, like is a good deal for them.
Oh yeah, that's huge. And the Ultramarines too. I think it's their rule is if a Solar Aux unit kills a model, then an Ultramarines unit charging that squad, they can only snap fire on their reaction, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah, that's huge.
huge,
Yeah, it's pretty huge.
you know.
I think this is just GW really realizing that Solar Auxilia were really, really plain and boring, and I think this is their attempt at kind of rectifying that. Because let's be honest, this is Marine on Marine combat. It's going to be a little boring, but when your Space Marines are more unique and diversified than the Solar Auxilia humans who come from 100 billion different worlds, maybe you need to do something to spice them up a little bit, which I'm glad
Totally.
about. It seems like the new cohort doctrine, the new Consularis that allows you to take all this auxilia, looks like it's really making a push to have auxilia be a bit more flavorful to the legions as a complement rather than their own separate thing, which I like a lot, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when they had first announced like Solar Aux coming out in plastic, I was like, yeah, that's cool. I don't know if I'm like tempted to buy those models. Like, I think they're cool, but I'm a guy that plays Allegiance, so I don't know if like the Imperial Guard really ever got to me. But just seeing how much they're like pushing to be like integrating your armies together with these new rules, it's definitely like I've never seen Solar Aux in this way where I'm like, well, maybe I do want that battle force. Maybe I do actually want to play, like, or at least have a small force of Solar Aux to throw in with my army just as like a flavorful detachment.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it means more Solar Rocks on the table, I'm all for it. I think, and I played since Heresy 1.0, and I've seen one Solar Auxilia army across the table
Yep.
from me. I mean, they're
Well,
also resin and expensive, right? And now with the plastic, hopefully we see more of them, but their core rules not that very
yeah.
interesting. I think, yeah, adding them into the legions and having the traits, and just, if you play Heresy, you probably already have a Legion, so you can just add on to that with an ally detachment as opposed to starting a 3,000 point army from scratch
Yeah.
of Solar Auxilia, which even in plastic is daunting. It's a ton of models.
A
Yeah,
lot of
like people like to get a good starting Solar Auxes. I'm hearing most people are buying like 3 of their starter boxes, which is like that's crazy. Like it's a good
Yeah.
amount of stuff, but like it's a lot of models to kind of get together
Yeah.
and paint. But like, yeah, I think at the end of the day, more diversity is never going to hurt Heresy, really. Like as far as as we keep to the kind of core universe of like what's happening at the Heresy at the time, like more Solar Rocks is always great. I hope that they do kind of more stuff like this, and like I'm hoping Mechanicum gets it too eventually.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
We
absolutely.
had that not quite teaser from
Which
Decepticon.
John, you told me I might have gotten duped.
Yeah, I
It's
hope
what's
the room.
the plastic knights.
So that's the rumor I've heard. It's going to be
Right,
the
I heard that
Atropos
too.
and all that. I hope it's just a rumor. I hope we actually get plastic Mechanicum because Mechanicum are a pretty big part of the heresy.
Right.
The schism at Mars is a big deal. So
Because think
having
about
more
like a
than a table would be
plastic
great.
Castellax coming out would be
Yeah.
great for even just like the legions. I mean, there's so many like
Yeah.
legion players that could use those.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Mhm.
I've actually got my own thoughts on that teaser. I don't think they're actually gonna do anything plastic with that. I think that's just them teasing the next campaign book, which will probably be the Schism of Mars. I don't think we'll actually get any plastic Mechanicum, unfortunately, or plastic Knights Trapos. I think it's
I
just
bet
gonna be a new campaign book for Mars.
we'll get like at least like 1 or 2 special characters in like new Forge World resin if that's if what you're saying is true. We're at least gonna get like 1 or 2 special characters in like new resin. They're gonna look great, and it's gonna be like cool.
Yeah.
It
And
could be
the
cool.
only
Like
reason the only reason I say this is because there's been this process I've noticed of the first book was Siege of Cathonia. That's outside
Right.
of Beta Garmon. Then we go to Beta
Right.
Garmon. It kind of makes sense that if this is the end of the heresy that we've just wrapped up in the books, they're gonna just bring it closer to Terra, and we'll eventually get a Mars campaign book, and then they're gonna
Yeah.
wrap it up with saying, "Hey guys, we're done with heresy. We're not gonna touch it for the next 10 years until 3.0. Here's Siege of Terra campaign book. Have fun. Bye."
Which, like, you when you were mentioning this, I had like never thought of Schism of Mars, and I was kind of over here pondering. I was like, oh, that'd be cool, as if we did like a liberation of Mars from like the traders of breach the soul defenses, and like they're rescuing Kelbor House units and stuff like that from Mars to get to Terra. I don't know like what really narratively they can get going on that, but that sounds like a cool process potentially.
I mean, it could be both, or it could be a campaign book and plastics. I think Games Workshop would be hesitant to release this super hype campaign book with a fully resin army. I think they learned their mistake with the initial Solar Aux launch, where you only had the resin available. So I think having a Mechanicum book without any plastic would be unlikely, just because, again, everything in Forge World sells out quickly if it's popular. And,
Yeah.
the resin production isn't as expansive as their plastic production. So yeah, I do like that idea where you kind of just move towards Siege of Terra as fast as possible. And Schism of Mars would be a really, really bridge from Beta Garmon to
So
Terra. But yeah,
prediction point on that, rather than do a plastic resin line, they'll just make all of the 40k Adeptus Mechanicus stuff actually playable for
Which they absolutely should. Like, the Skitarii should be ready to rumble. Like, that should be our next real army we put in Heresy. It's like the full Skitarii.
So there's actually a specific reason why that won't happen, which is kind of whack. So this is from the old world. So the old world has a lot of armies that share models with the Age of Sigmar range, and a lot of those armies, like Beastmen, Skaven, Dark Elves, who are all in Age of Sigmar, got essentially legacy armies, like PDFs. And the reason, allegedly, is that the accounting team can't determine. Let's say people buy 1 million Skaven. Well, are they buying Skaven for Age of Sigmar, or are they buying Skaven for Old World? How do we know? Where do we allocate more? Because if let's say for Heresy, right, people buy a bunch of Space Marines, well, Heresy's doing well. Let's put more funding into Space Marines, which is unfortunate for us, because I would love to see plastic Skitarii in Heresy. But if they do, I can imagine they're going to do the Peltas and the Spear dudes in plastic, as opposed to porting the 40k ones for super corporate reasons.
Darn, like, I really want the Dune Crawler and the Sigonian Dragoons, I think they're called. Like, I really want
they're so cool.
Like, I don't really need the new Bat guys and like the copter thing that they came out with. Like, I love the horse guys on it in there, but like, yeah, I really want to see Skitarii Legions kind of become more of a thing.
Yeah, because they're in like every book where Mechanicum's in. There's like Skitarii Regiment, gets slaughtered by Space Marines or whatever, right? So
I do think they did really smartly, though, like in the same thing with Siege of Chthonia, where we didn't have any background on the Siege of Chthonia, right? Until that's a brand new story that they wrote within the confines of the story they already had. So like in the Solar War, slight spoilers, the very beginning of the Siege of Terra books, we get a very quick synopsis of like between them getting into the solar system, and at the end of the book, they're at Terra, So there's so much you can write in between those, like these battles of certain like fleets or planets or things that we just didn't see.
I was gonna say, let's get Zone Mortalis Jupiter shipyards. That's what
right. The Jovian ship plans and stuff like that. That would be tight as hell. And they talking about what might be coming in the Beta Garmon book. I don't know if you guys kind of know what might be going on, but my theory is right now is like, so one of the Apex missions is about 2 Primarchs fighting. I'm hoping that we get Jagatai Khan's kind of part of Beta Garmon, where him and the White Scars go out and maybe fight Horus. Well, like, we know really what Sanguinius does.
The missions are like the Apex missions are tailored towards the White Scars and the Sons of Horus.
Right, which is what I heard, and like I've heard that the Zengan Mar, the new guy, the Hibu Khan, came out, so like they might be doing Dwell stuff as well. Like, I don't really know what they're doing with all the lore in this one, but that's kind of my speculation, is that we might get Jagatai versus Horus in this Beta Garmon book, which I think would be tight.
Yeah, which is a good segue into the next part of the book. We can talk about like the missions. So there's the 2 new Apex missions. The Primarch mission sounds really cool. I'm curious to see what the rules are. My concern is that like some Primarchs are just better than others. So I'm like, if you have like Russ or Ferris or the Lion versus like any weapon skill 7 Primarch, like
you're gonna have
It's
a bad
not
time.
really a competition, you know.
Yeah.
I think I heard though that there's an extra rule in there that in this mission your Primarch can come back to keep fighting. Like I think at the end of the day, like it's about how many wounds your Primarch does to each other. Like so, it's the idea that they're almost kind of like an infinite wounds, and it's just
Yeah.
like how many you can rack up. I'm not sure about that though. And then it's obviously about the rest of your Legion taking some points around the Primarch, but hopefully that should. I don't know if it helps mitigate any of that, where you're like, oh, my Primarch's dead in round 2. Like that's great. What game? Good game, you know.
Yeah. No, I'm very curious to see like what they do if there is a rule to mitigate that, what that lands up being. Because yeah, I mean that is one of those like we all love to see those like Primarch v Primarch battles, but yeah, there is a little bit of a sense where if you roll up to a game with your like slightly not as good Primarch versus another Primarch, it's like I either have to avoid him the whole game or be really lucky with my dice rolls, you know.
Or hope the bodyguard kills him.
Yeah. Um, and then it sounds like the main missions, this was one of the things that was a little bit disappointing. They're just the same missions as Siege of Sithonia. Um, which like I really like those missions. Like I think they're really fun.
Definitely.
It would have been nice to have some more new missions in there.
Yeah, I think more ways to play Heresy is never a bad thing. Like we can all kind of agree, like, this mission is not very good, whatever. Like we kind of ignore it. Like I don't know about you, but like I feel like every time I roll for a deployment zone, if it's one that I like really don't feel like I want to set up for, we'll kind of fudge it a little bit. But like at the end of the day, like more rules and like ideas for how to play, I think are important. So not getting another, 3 or 4 missions is kind of disappointing to me, but glad the Apex missions are different. And it seems like we're getting stratagems as well, which I think are interesting things as they keep expanding options for those. Those can potentially kind of be used more regularly, I think, between local communities.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to be like, oh, we're not getting new missions, and that does suck. Like, don't get me wrong, like that. I wish we got like 1 or 2 new missions, but it is nice not to have to like, oh, okay, I want to play a Siege of Cathonia mission, but I have the Beta Garmon book, and now I have to go and lug 2 more books on top of the rule book and my leg or Libra Hereticus or whatever. Like I have so many books I have to lug at this point that it is kind of, in a way, it is a little nice that even though I would have rather, of course, new missions, it is nice that at least I don't have to continuously bring new books every single time.
Yeah,
absolutely. I get you, but
I was saying that's not going to apply to Horus players or Sons of Horus players because they're going to still bring 2 books for their 2 characters in 2 separate books, unfortunately.
And I got to bring my Solar Auxilia, allies now, so now I need to bring 2 more books, and it always just cascades. I don't care about having to bring more books. I'll bring them if I need to.
Bring a tote bag with all the books. Bring your little library along.
All I'm gonna have back problems by then. Yeah. I was like, what did you do? I'm like, I played a lot of Horus Heresy in my day. 15 books in my backpack.
Oh, is this going to be what we're going to tell the future war gamers? Back in our day, to play Horus Heresy, we had to travel through 13 miles of snow with 15 books on our backs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we're all most excited about is Shattered Legions and Black Shields. Getting some I think there's a lot of people who have been waiting a long time for these rules. And I mean, we obviously haven't read the book yet, but we've seen kind of the general gist of it. So starting with Shattered Legions, basically it seems like you get to pick 2 to 3 legions, and then for every squad, depending on how many of each legion are in that squad, you have a major and a minor, which are both buffs. And then along with the minor, there's a flaw that gets applied to the squad. But it's decided in every phase, which apparently there's a designer's note that literally says, like, this is not designed for events. Like, this is you're basically like, we know this is confusing and this is going to take some time to play.
I like that disclaimer, honestly, because it shows intent. They know that this is not for regular gameplay. This is for the people who really want to play Shattered Legions, have a very specific mind, and have friends who want to play it. So I'll give them kudos on that disclaimer. Am I a little sad that this seems very complicated? I'll hold my actual opinion on that until I actually have the book in hand and read through it,
Read
because
it. Yeah.
complexity for one person is another person's, oh, what am I doing? Just making bread? Whereas
Right.
other people would be like, oh my God, I'm making a 3-stacked cake and I have to
Yeah.
know how to make 5 different variations of X, Y, and Z.
I mean, I think, and obviously it's like the first 2 times anyone plays them, it's going to be really confusing. But I think if you get experienced playing Shattered Legions and you know your rules, you know, I mean, it's like anything else. If you're playing an opponent, like if you're a Legions player playing a Mechanicum player, like I don't know what any of your stuff does. Like every time something does something, I'm like, wait, what does that do? So I'm like, it's not that different from
Right.
when it's like, oh hey, like yeah, remind me what you're doing, like what this does. I mean, there's definitely that more adamant having to pick in every phase, but if you get experienced with it, and you have like maybe you bring tokens and you're like, all right, this is what this is for this phase, and like it's
Well, that's interesting.
very clear.
I think the annoying math for me is determining which rules apply each phase, because you literally have to count, right? Like how many salamanders are left in the squad versus Iron Hands. It's like, okay, then they get this rule. Okay, next phase, I take 3 casualties. Like, oh, do I remove 2 Iron Hands? Do I remove a salamander? So so that I think could get annoying. But
Oh,
I
yeah.
think if you're just if you don't try to game it too hard, which goes back to the whole community policing kind of thing, or
Yeah.
and all that, where I'm not gonna, if I play Shattered Legions, I'm not gonna math out, okay, if I remove X Iron Hand, so I get the Raven Guard rule, this will be better for this, because then it'll slow the game down, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's actually a good point, because I feel like, again, that comes back to like the self-regulation in the community, not knowing what all of the buffs are. It would be really upsetting if you're like playing against someone who's like, hey, yeah, my Shattered Legions are like Ultramarines and Word Bearers and Alpha Legion. And it's like, what? And you're just like combining the 3 best things
Right.
together to like crush your opponent. And it's like, hopefully if you're playing Shattered Legions, it's because you love the lore of it and you're not just being like, oh, here's the cheesiest things I can do with this,
Yeah, I do think that if someone tries to bring out a Shattered Legions, with Ultramarines and Word Bearers and like Aerial Fists and Demon, or not even Demon, like just as gamey as possible, I'd be like, you're just trying to win this. Like it goes back to what we were saying, like we are a self-regulating community, and you really have to cite your book that you're pulling this from before like cool with you just whipping that one out.
Yeah, every Shattered Legions player needs to bring the Horus Heresy book that their list is from to prove.
Yes. Yes.
Like, excuse me, where's
It's
your
a good
research
principle
here?
for everyone's armies going forward.
Like, show me your citations.
Yeah.
For your Ultramarine Word Bearer force.
Who is Oracle Word? Like, yes, I want you better cite the sources,
Look, we're literally turning into historical war gamers. Look, this is my force from the Third Napoleonic War.
Yeah.
This is the specific regiment colors and the specific commander, and here who is involved. By the way, my standard bearer is modeled after the actual standard bearer, John Henry Louis the Fourth, whatever.
Yeah.
Gonna get into the kind of levels of nonsense.
But I mean,
honestly, mad respect for those people, though. Mad
Oh
respect.
yeah. Okay. You know what? I need to make sure that this gets into make sure you include this part, Randy. I do not mean anything against the historical war gamers. I have nothing but respect for them because they take modeling and hobby painting to an extreme that I could never bring myself to actually do because it's just way too much. But I have seen some of those historical war gamers. Mad props to them. They have some very beautiful, I don't know how to explain it other than just amazing attention to detail, because I love history. I love reading history. So when I see some of these games being played out, I'm like, oh, I recognize these forces from history books. I know exactly what battle they're playing. And that's just that snap moment of, oh, I see this. So
yeah.
No,
cool stuff.
no bad word on them. Just pointing out the fun of being too detailed.
Yeah.
and especially for fantasy wargaming, which is what we do. Um, I don't have a lot of opinion right now on the Shattered Legion. I'm excited to get my hands on the book and actually start diving into it. So like maybe at another time we can come back and talk about them, because right now my initial impression is, having played Heresy 1, and this is a little derivative, but I mean at the end of the day, like I really enjoyed the Shattered Legion rules for last edition. And I like the synergy it brought between all the legions. And I'm a little worried this one has kind of muddled it a little too much. But once again, I'm going to reserve judgment until I actually like get my hands on it and start playing it. But what I am excited for is that Black Shields actually seem much more interesting now. Like, so last edition, it was like basically if you played the Black Shields, like they basically just didn't have a Legion trait. Like you could kind of assign them something to make them like a little bit more interesting, but really, they're talking about in this one that you can do like oaths and stuff like that to kind of give you more variety in how you play and like how each unit is taken. I'm just really excited for that kind of stuff. I think that's going to be a really interesting way to kind of customize, and maybe we start seeing more Black Shields appearing, like just kind of pirate legions or stuff like that.
And
I've been personally thinking about doing a 11th Legion, like a fallen, like an 11th Legion Black Shield company that's come back, and they're like fallen to Malal and doing a Chaos Demons that fight Chaos Demons.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I feel like Black Shields are kind of a way in. Like if you're a 40K Space Marines player, you get like there's a lot of those 40K players who like creating their own chapters and like having their own history. And I think that Black Shields are your way in if that's what you want to do. If you want to make a force that is its own thing, and you can kind of like choose your own like paint scheme or whatever, like Black Shields are what you want. Like that's what it's like. You have these Marines who just kind of renegade and just like screw it. Like I'm not involved. I'm gonna do my own thing. And like that's allows you to kind of like be a little bit more out there with your paint scheme and like your backstory for your army. The other thing that's interesting that I think is like, depending on, once we get the book and we see like how the oaths work and like how complicated the Shadow Legion rules really are. I saw online someone was saying like, if you really want to, you could just run Shattered Legions with Black Shield rules. Like if it lands up being that much easier to do, nobody's gonna bat an eye. You'd be like, yeah, this is my Black Shield Shattered Legions list.
Agreed.
Yeah, totally. Like if you're not in love with the Shattered Legions rules, and you could very easily port it to the Black Shields and be like, yeah, they kind of did their own thing, but I'm using make a Shattered Legions army, and I didn't want to use that rule set. I think that's totally cool.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost the same, because like I have my Luna Wolves list. I'm like, I mean, I'm using the Sons of Horus rules because that's what you have, but they're a loyalist Luna Wolves list, and I think that's just what people would expect anyways. So I it's not really that much different in my opinion for that. And then I think that could bring us to like the characters. I have to say, I feel like everybody knows this, but it's like, enough fucking Sons of Horus. Don't get me wrong.
And as a speaker for all Shattered Legions as well, like I'm going to insert myself here, but like, please, for the love of God, give us something, give something to the Iron Hands, Raven Guard, or the Salamanders. Please, I beg you.
Hey man, I'm just saying, it's not called the Salamanders Heresy. It's not called the Word Bears Heresy. It's called the Horus Heresy. So we gotta make sure our boys in green get some. No, I'm just kidding. Now I'm about to play Sons of Horus, and there's way too many Sons of Horus characters for sure.
Yeah.
But
like
that said, go ahead, Randy. You wanna?
Well, no, I was just gonna say, like, even like in terms of like having there be like another Traitor Legion that they're going up against. Like a lot of the Traitor Legions don't have great characters either. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be all Shadow Legion's characters, but just like show some love to other legions.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I was really hoping, so like, we've all heard the comment that like eventually every legion is going to get their Forge World, special, Praetor models that come out. And I was really hoping that they maybe prioritize the Shattered Legion ones for this drop of Beta Garmon. I understand why they did Tybalt Mar and why they're doing Horus Axeman. They're obviously very important characters. And then obviously Shadrach Medusan. It's just like, it's not frustrating, obviously. Shadrach Medusan is like a perfect person to put in when you're doing Shattered Legion rules. He just has nothing to do with Beta Garmon, which is kind of like more of my comment on that. Because like really none of these characters, I think, besides Tipplemore and Horus Axeman, end up showing up at Beta Garmon by the end of it. I don't know about Hiddu Khan yet. I haven't been able to read all of his stuff, but yeah, it's just like it would have just been cool. I wish that we'd just gotten a couple more characters, but like really, one day we'll get our day in the sun. Watch out.
My favorite part about the special characters, which I'm actually super excited for these special characters, because so in Heresy 1.0, I had this term I coined called random asshole syndrome, where when they release Legion rules, right? Because before you had Legion rules per campaign book. It wasn't just like a book with all the legions, but all the special characters were like these random dudes who are never in any book. They were just created for the game, which is, in a way is cool, but like I mentioned earlier at the beginning, I play Heresy because I want to see the dudes in the novels on the tabletop, and it's just like, hey, here's, I don't know,
Gygor Fellhand.
I'm
looking at my list of characters right now that they have out, and I was like, who was this? And everyone thought it was Bjorn originally when he was coming out.
Right, yeah, you got Gygor Fellhand, you got that one Blood Angel Destroyer guy with the face mask.
Judikar Aster Crone. I went through and I did a list of everyone just so I had this for our talk. But yeah, I've been like kind of going through and trying to figure out like who actually has stuff like right now for each legion, and you'd be like surprised to see, Iron Hands have 5 distinct, special characters to, special units, compared to, Sons of Horus, which has like 8 or 9 right now.
Right. No, but yeah, at least now we're seeing more of the book dudes getting models, which is super cool. Though, yeah, to echo Reed, it would be nice if all the legions got, equal of. I mean, even like my Sons of Horus joke, right? Like it's a Horus Heresy. Like, there's not a lot of Sons of Horus centered novels. There's like the trilogy, there's Vengeful Spirit, and I think Slaves to Darkness, and then I guess the Siege of Terra. There's a lot.
Malik, whichever one that was.
Yeah, the Vengeful Spirit. That's the one. That's good. Yeah, but
I mean, John,
a lot of them don't have a lot of stuff.
There is a positive for this, John, though, and that is that we can expect there to be a lot of support for Heresy now, because if they're taking their sweet time getting everyone's models out, it means they're not rushing it.
Yes.
Which means we can probably at least look forward to a consistent, if somewhat unfair, release of models for the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, as long as they're releasing shit at the end of the day, like that's all that needs to matter, I think.
I think my biggest bummer about the new character releasing is that there was no Imperial Fist character, which is like super huge.
Go away, man.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
That's great.
Everyone who's listening to this, I need your combined might boo Beto so he can hear it for the next 3 years. Every time they see him, boo for that comment.
Joking aside, though, to echo Reed's comment earlier with Beto's like snarky remark, Imperial Fists were a Beta Garmon, and Hibu Khan kind of wasn't, from what I remember.
Right.
And Medushan for sure wasn't.
Gets killed at Dwell, like pretty sure. And like, so like I think that some of like, and once again, I'm gonna read the Beta Garmon book, and I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff in there that's cool. It's just that like, okay, so once again, Salamander Player at Heart, that's like my first legion that I really got into Heresy with. Like the one time that they're mentioned in company strength is at Beta Garmon. And then we got one of the exemplar rules, like one of the online releases that talked about, it was the Alpha Legion versus Salamanders one, with the like little free special units, and it was like, Brayarth Ashmath or Cassian Dracos is what he's called in 30K. He and the Disciples of Fire show up, so like there's obviously some like really big Salamander stuff going on there, and like it's just probably not going to be talked about, which like this part of the Beta Garmon, probably they're dead by this point, so I can kind of understand it, but I just wish that, the kind of lesser looked at legions got like, once again, a little bit more limelight. Cause like, once again, like the Thousand Sons got to show up in Siege of Cathonia, and like, what a cool reuse, and like kind of showing like, hey, there were loyalist Thousand Sons that eventually at some point, and, it just kind of reinforces that there's a lot of cool stuff, to like look at potentially.
Yeah.
And building different.
No, that was cool. Cause like we've played like Beto, because he has his word bearers. Like we did like that Zone Mortalis, like Thousand Sons versus Word Bearers mission, and it's cool. And it's like not something you would have expected from Siege of Sithonia, but it's like a really nice bit of flavor that, hopefully they do inject that into this book. There's something in there that's like not expected. Because there's so many heresy events that include all the different legions. And it's just like, I get in 40K, it's like the Ultramarines are the poster boys, but it's like it's weird to me that the Imperial Fist and Sons of Horus are like, I get that they're the poster boys for heresy, but it's like it's not like they're the favorite legions. Like every legion has its own like pretty rabid group of fans. So like that's where I'm confused, where it's like if you were to release a Salamanders, Iron Warriors, these characters, they're gonna sell out. Like the Stormseer sold out like immediately. Like these are very popular legions. It's not like, some random like Space Marine chapter in 40K that nobody plays. So that's like, for me, I feel like GW makes a lot of these random decisions sometimes where it's like it doesn't make sense. Like you're basically picking 2 out of 18, which means you're alienating a very large percentage of your playing group, like by not giving them something to buy,
Have they shown off the little Horus model? Like,
I don't think so.
They have not.
I mean, I'm sure they're making one because they have the official rule. I mean, maybe we'll see. Maybe this Thursday there'll be something, or
yeah, they're releasing every single one prior, and then for the big reveal for him, because
I bet
he's the biggest name like on there for sure. Like,
yeah. And apparently his rule has a thing where if he is facing off against Loken, which is super random, if Loken dies, he gets a victory point. If he kills Loken, he gets 2 victory points.
Oh, cool.
Which is very cool, but like, when will that ever happen?
Right. Well, do you know, like, have you read the Siege fully?
I mean, I've read all the books, but I haven't.
Cool.
Like you told me, like when he fights Loken.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, that's kind of how their story ends, and like that's kind of the cool part.
Getting into spoiler territory here.
Hey, man, I know that's why I'm trying to kind of keep it a little like on the vague right there, but
yeah.
I'm assuming most people, once again, like by the way, most characters are dead by 40K. So like spoiler alert.
If you're a loyalist,
Yeah, sorry if I gotta tell you.
I can name at least one non-Primarch who is still alive in 40K, and that's Bajorn Fellhand, which we still don't have a model for.
Mm-hmm. But we have Gygor Fellhand once again. Like, thanks a lot, Games Workshop.
Is that going to be the new meme? It's no longer thanks Obama, it's thanks Games Workshop.
Thanks James Workshop.
I think back to what you're saying, Randy, though, about like clearly like every legion is very popular, and like we were saying, like the White Scars, like Stormseer selling out, like you don't think that there's a ton of White Scars players out there because you just kind of assume like that's probably like a lesser loved legion, but the reality is that all 18 of the legions are well loved amongst groups, and it's like to not have Praetors for each one, and instead I'm getting like another Sons of Horus character, like cool, that's awesome to see, but also like just give me a generic Salamanders, give me a generic Iron Hands,
I mean, just from like
the generic. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, like with the Iron Hands, like they technically even have their Cataphracti version of their Praetor. Like you literally just need to give them the power armor version. The Iron Father from first edition is like a really great model.
I mean, just from like a practical perspective, like as a Sons of Horus or Imperial Fist player, you're not running 3 named characters in your list. Yeah, most you're running 1, and like you probably are just running Sigismund, because why the fuck would you run anybody else? And then like all these other characters, you're like, why would I buy this? Like Sigismund's the best, like Sons of Horus, like Abaddon can deep strike with just Darren. Why would I run anybody else? So it's like you have all these characters that you're never really going to use because you already have your one favorite character. So
unless these are your favorite characters, which we understand, Tillamar and Horus Axeman are cool. But
oh, totally. But that's
at the same time, yeah.
That's not
They're not Abaddon.
know how many like little Horus and Tibalt Mar super fans there are.
Man, if your favorite character is Horus Axamand, I got some words with you.
Yeah, Tibalt Mar, like, he's the either. It's like he's not very important. Like people only started telling who he was when the other guy that looked exactly like him died, and that's when it was like, oh, okay, we can remember your name now.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, the best thing you could say about some of these characters is that like you could use them as generic consoles or praetors and chop things off, remove things, whatever. Like, so at least it's something that you can use for converting stuff.
So actually, going off of that, the one thing I do wish GW would actually do rules-wise is actually some better rules for Praetor and Centurion customization, which I think maybe brings us into the whole new console choices.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, the Legion console, the Overseer is an interesting. So it's basically like it's a very narrative, fluffy character where it's basically he has a retinue of Solar Ox, which it's kind of cool if you just want like, hey, I just want to paint up like a couple squads of Solar Ox and then I can run them in my Legion list.
I was gonna say, seeing this, my first thought was immediately, oh, I can get 3 line units in my HQ. Sweet.
Yeah. Imagine if he runs with like 60 Solar Ox in his retinue, something crazy.
Yeah, with leadership 10. Jeez.
Yeah. That would be pretty cool. I mean, we haven't really seen his rules, so I don't know much else. My guess is he's probably got standard Centurion stats beyond that. And then there's the Legion Opte, which seems like it's basically just a veteran profile. That's an HQ. And
He's only 40 points, too. He's a little cheaper than a Centurion.
I was gonna say, like,
cheap.
what's his difference between just like running a normal Centurion?
I think he's just
yeah.
cheaper and not as good.
I think from the review they were saying how he's got power armor, no invulnerable save.
Yeah,
And
ballistic
it's just-
skill 4 too. He can't shoot as good. Not that
Mhm.
So veteran profile, which probably means I'm actually wondering if he has 1 or 2 wounds. You think he has 1
He
or
has
2
2.
wounds?
It's
2
two.
wounds? Okay.
I mean, I read that and I was immediately like, this is a really cool opportunity for like Theo from Mark of Calth.
Yeah.
Him as
Yeah.
this guy, like do like a Zone Mortalis, like Gilliman's flagship unit.
Yeah, he doesn't seem very exciting from a gameplay perspective of like, what does he bring to the table? Well, nothing really, but you're right,
Yeah.
Randy. He is a cool kind of way to bring in some like junior officers of the Legion who aren't full Centurions yet, but you know, are in a leadership role or something in your army.
I mean, it's basically if you want to run a line veteran squad, essentially.
Yeah.
And you have a free HQ slot.
But that's the
kind
thing.
of-
The line, because the Legion command squad that he gets, the
company command squad.
Yeah, they don't gain, or you can run them with a regular Centurion. So you're like, why? I mean, I guess you're getting them at a discount rate, but I feel like I need to have the 5-up invulnerable save if he's like a character. I'm assuming he's going up against something tough.
Unless he's just a tax, then at that point, which like then you just want to keep him cheap.
Yeah. I mean, because that 5-up invuln isn't really saving you from that much. Like, if a squad of snipers wants to kill him, you're probably gonna kill him. So the interesting thing is that, like, I was reading up, the company command squad can only be run with the Opte or Vanilla Centurion.
Yeah.
They can't be run with a console, which is a little bit disappointing.
I feel like that's just a rules oversight. That's got to get cleared up in an FAQ, right?
I mean, we'll see, but if you look in like the Stardust and Hereticus books, it very clearly says there's a difference between Centurion and console. And so it seems like they're being very specific by saying Centurion. And I mean, we'll see. Like maybe I'm sure there'll be an FAQ in a week. But rules is written right now. Like that's a little bit of a bummer because I was like, it would be really cool to run them with like snipers and a Master of Signals and like in a Rhino and chuck them up the board and just cause some havoc.
Yeah.
But
I difference is like, okay, I either if I can run them with a librarian or something cool, like that I have like this mobile sniper unit that's also line and veteran stats, I would take that in a second. But if I have to like spend the HQ choice on a generic guy, like I don't think it's not worth it, but I don't know if it's like I'm running out to buy this command squad kit right away, you know?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. The fact that you have to take the Centurion makes him, I think, more expensive than, or makes the command squad more expensive than we initially think, because it's 50 points you got to spend, and if you want to add your librarian or master signal, or whatever, that's another whatever points and an HQ slot. So
yeah, I mean, because at that point you may as well run your Praetor with a command squad and
yeah,
a better unit, you know?
Yeah, no, I
It still has line.
Yeah.
it still has like I think we're getting maybe a little bit too deep into the rules, but I feel like this is more meant for where you have those smaller 1,500, 2,000 point games where kitting out that 10-man command squad is really just too much of an investment. But a veteran squad, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just don't. I guess I don't find myself playing at those levels yet, and it's just because like I need to finish my Zone Mortalis board. But yeah, I guess I don't see them much optimization, not optimization, but much use for them in like a 3,000 point list, I guess.
Which actually is a good point. Like this is actually, for speaking of Zone Mortalis, this might actually be a great HQ option for Zone Mortalis.
Yeah, totally.
You
Like
know
a-
what?
Which
like
is
a
just like once
cheap-
again, then it's just a tax. It's like literally you just want to
Yeah,
pay
like a
that 40
cheap
points.
line
Then,
HQ for your
Yeah.
Zone Mortalis to allow you to bulk out the rest of your army. If you're keeping them in the backfield, just at an objective or something. That's not.
I was gonna say it's the two special weapons I'm interested in. I mean, as a Dark Angels player, if I can toss a veteran squad with 2 plasma repeaters or 2 plasma burners and have line, that's amazing for me.
Well, just being able to, because the command squad cannot run snipers. So like a generic command squad right now, you can't run.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And they can't take
Like-
special or heavy weapons either, but this
Yeah.
one can.
But yeah, this one it can. So there is like definitely a place to be like, I think if you're kitting this one out as like an attack, like your veteran squad, like lightning claws and stuff, there's a point to be made because they're pretty cheap on them. But I do think where they really come in handy is like, yeah, you throw snipers on them, and in a rhino, they just jump out, shoot something, and then if something gets close to them, they can just react back into the rhino and get away. Like you can just jump around the board and have a mobile sniping unit.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. So I mean, there's definitely a use for it. I think we'll see, like in the coming months when it's out, like how people integrate it into their army, what ends up happening with it. Because I feel like there's a lot of those units where you don't immediately see the benefit of it. You're like, this is weird, and then you'll see someone use it and be like, oh wow, that's like what they did with that is really cool. Like that makes sense. Like I'm gonna do that.
It may be like some legions make use of it better than others. It just might be that kind of situation.
Yeah.
All it takes is one guy using it like in a way that you never saw coming. That you're like, all right, I got to get that squad. Like
Right.
I mean, I can think of one way, and that is as Dark Angels player, because our Rite of Wars don't let us give our special into troop slot guys line. So we're like having to balance between taking tactical squads and extra cool units. For the Dreadwing Rite of War, I could totally imagine just taking a Praetor with a command squad, 2 of the what do you call them? 2 Legion Opti with these company command squads, just get some extra plasma burners, and then still probably taking 2 like tactical squads or destroyer squads, but then 4 interruptor squads. Let's bring on that plasma burn.
Oh, I'm gonna run 2 command squads in one of these squads. I'm gonna go every single one of my squads gonna have.
Yeah. I'm also very curious because I'm assuming this is like the new set. This is going to be a set that's going to come out at some point.
Mhm.
Oh, the command squad, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's a cool squad, and I'm hoping it actually comes with decent weapon options.
I'm hoping they make 2 versions, honestly. I'm hoping they make a Mark III and a Mark VI version, just so that we can have the option to mix and match where we want to.
Yeah.
I think also the question is we need a Terminator banner, which like I don't think that there's actually really a good one to use right now. I've like looked around and tried to figure out who has the best Terminator banner I could steal, but
I
Yeah,
don't
that's
think
kind
there
of
is
one of my
you're
things I'm
right.
hoping for.
Actually, the old not the old, rather the recently replaced Dark Angels kit, Dark Angels Deathwing Knights from 40K had a pretty decent Terminator standard, I
Yeah,
think.
but
Did
it
they?
has a lot of heraldry on, like
Oh yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
plastic. So it's like, how much, work to do versus, because I've also been thinking about like taking the Grey Knights one, but like at the end of the day, like there's no blank hand, normal
Yeah,
Terminator hand
yeah.
pull
Yeah.
banner, which that doesn't bother me a ton. It's just been trying to source a banner for some of my Terminators has been interesting.
I was gonna say, just get those red plastic straws that you get from fast food restaurants for coffee.
Right.
Those are
And just
just
make one of
about,
those.
yeah. That's what I did for one of my Terminators. I
Or,
have
or
I
I've
have a
seen
green
like
stuffed
Brass
banner.
Rod.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen Brass Rod, and I'm gonna do a Night Lords banner for my Terminator squad. So like I'm just gonna do like a flayed skin,
Yeah.
kind of green stuff thing anyway. So like I'm not
Or a
like
corpse.
exactly. So I think that I have some options, but I was just like, that's kind of I think what we need more than like another you know company command squad, because like I think
And
I could source the banner for most
that's a
things.
good that's a good point because I feel like there's so many things that like are generic options in the book that just don't exist model wise. That you have to
Yep.
like source them from random places. And it's like, again, it's one of those things we can talk about like 3D model, like 3D printing a bit. Like GW is forcing their players to get 3D printed bits because they just don't have stuff. Like, I'm not gonna pay 20 something dollars for a Terminator upgrade pack that has two Thunder Hammers in it and a bunch of power malls. You know, like I'm gonna go get some 3D printed Thunder Hammers. Like I'm not gonna like it's or like getting sniper rifles. Like I'm not gonna pay like a bunch of money for like a 5-man recon squad because it's the only way to get sniper rifles.
Oh no, I absolutely agree with that. When the to tack on to that, I'm still very disappointed in GW having done their disc spoiler upgrade kit. 20, 20,
The
25
five
bucks
man,
for
The worst.
5 chain swords,
Yeah.
5 bolt pistols.
the
It's
one
not
heavy
enough to
chainsaw.
even build one disc spoiler. I would
Yeah.
have been okay if it was actually 10 of them, plus like if they did an actual 10 chain swords, 10 bolt pistols, and like maybe 2 special, like 2
But like
special
look at
weapons.
the
You couldn't
assault
have done
squad.
special
You could just
weapons.
you could buy the assault squad and just switch their backpacks from what I understand, and you'd have
Yeah.
your 10 chain
And it
swords
would
and your
be
10 bolt
cheaper.
pistols.
Yes.
It would literally be cheaper than buying a bunch of tacticals and the upgrade,
Right.
present
Mhm.
upgrades.
Yes.
It's because they totally botched the Assault Marine release, and they were like, okay, we need
Mhm.
some people over. So they did the worst resin 5 chainsword kit, and they're like, this will hold people for like another couple months till the Assault Marines are out.
It
Yeah.
wasn't even a
Shame,
month.
GW.
It was
Shame.
what, almost 8 months between the release of that chainsword pack and the assault squads.
But I do think that this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how Horus Heresy is the expert level or like the retirement home for 40K players, because instead of us being like, man, like I guess I'll just wait till a banner comes out. Like nobody's doing that. So we're just gonna sort. We're like all capable conversion artists at this point that we're just gonna make our own banner and it's gonna look great. Like
Yeah.
Speak for yourself there, Beto. My green stuff skills are absolute dog shit. I
I
look at
Hey,
my banner in
Esteban, I
shame.
agree. But like at the end of the day, like I think there's such a community wide push to do conversions. Like,
Mhm.
you show up in a 40K with your like custom army that like who's like, your samurai Tau that people can barely tell what they are. They're like, what is this? Compared to like in Heresy, you bring that as like a militia army. People are like, this is the coolest thing in the world.
it's way more of a community based on being like that's so cool versus like yeah, you try to bring a Count's as army of Orc Imperial Guards to a 40K tournament,
Right.
going to get dirty looks because people want to immediately know what that thing is.
Yeah. It's like I want all of my characters like to feel, I mean, not like every unit in the army, but like at least my independent characters, I want them to feel at least somewhat unique. If it's swapping
Mhm.
head or a weapon or whatever, like
Right.
needs to not be the same model. It's like you see like the 2 characters from the Age of Darkness box set, or like the old Mark of Calth Chaplain. Like whenever I see those not modded, I'm like, come on.
It's
You know what?
yeah,
Honestly, both those models look so much better with just a simple helmet swap. You take your Legion appropriate helmet and instantly 2 points better.
yeah. I mean, I think that should be the starting place for all conversions, right? I'll get my Legion shoulder pad on my Praetor, or I'll get my Legion like a head on my Praetor. Like that's just level 1 of conversion, and I think that's always encouraged. And why I'm like, yeah, I'm excited for these command squad bits because it's just like new bits. But if I got to source the banner from something else, I'm still gonna have a good time like converting it.
So you're giving me flashbacks to EVE Online, where the skill level is, oh yeah, step 1, replace the helmet. Step 2, green stuff an entire banner.
Yeah,
that seems to be the implication here for me, Beto.
I mean, I just use bits. Like I'm using some Primaris banners for my command squad. Now it is annoying because now I gotta find a Primaris Ancient, right? Or I gotta like my Blood Angel Terminator command squad. I use the Sanguinary Guard banner. Well, I gotta find a Sanguinary Guard banner.
I have an extra one if
which
you
is
need one. So hit me up.
Sounds good. Will do, Reed. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still annoying that you can't just click the button and buy the banner, You gotta get the kit, find the banner, then you have a kit, or go to a Bits website. Hopefully they have the banners in stock. So yeah, it would be nice to just have that.
When I first started Heresy, collecting my Ultramarines, I was like, I want all my stuff to be GW official, right? I was like, I'm not getting any like 3D printed stuff. I'm not doing I was like, I want to support GW and I want to get, I paid the stupid amount of money for my resident suzerain and like, I did all that stuff. But then it's like you get to a point here where you're like, this just doesn't exist. Like I'm trying to build my army out and this stuff doesn't exist. And
I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to fill out boards with terrain where I'm just like, I'm gonna go bankrupt. Like, or I'm definitely never gonna own a house if I try to fill up a table of GW terrain.
Yeah. And it's also the GW terrain these days just isn't that good. Like
we need more kits and they need to stay in stock longer. Like, like the Sector Imperialis is sold out with those kits are incredible.
Yeah. But they also the problem with those kits is that they don't block line of sight. Like they're all these open windows, and you can say to your opponent, "Hey, let's count this as line of sight blocking." But you have all these beautiful ruins, and you can literally see across the board.
I just wish they'd do more terrain, and make it a little bit more accessible. It's just I love that kind of stuff to see and imagine what I can make with it. And I would hate a lessening of quality to go towards more tournament style terrain, which is definitely what Frontline Gaming emphasizes, and I can rightly so for what their model is.
I personally just want to go back to the days of 3rd edition where you got 2 ruins and some trees with your Marines and Dark Eldar.
You want that again?
Just a little piece of terrain, just little pieces of terrain, man.
Just look at that re-release that they just did of the the box that comes with the downed plane.
Oh, McCrag.
The McCrag box. And I'm like, everybody who bought that box is going to toss out the Marines and keep the terrain.
Keep the Aquila Lander,
I had to keep myself from buying 2 or 3 of those. I had to remind myself, no, it's not worth $200 per Aquila Lander. I have somewhere in my apartment 3 or 4-ish sets of Aquila Lander that I've managed to accumulate of years of trading with friends and people I've met who just didn't want it. And I'm like, I already have 4 Aquila Landers. I don't need to buy 2 more. And it was a real struggle to actually not want to buy those because I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to take those Nids, take those Marines, chuck them into a box to give as a gag gift to someone in the future, and just keep the Landers. It was going to be the most expensive $200 Lander I've ever purchased.
I know. It was the same thing. I could not bring myself to do it, but it was a struggle. I was like, I want this. I want this terrain. I can't.
I just wish they would just done they could have just done the Lander by itself. If they had just done the Lander by itself, I would have gladly shelled out $100 for it. not 200 though. Not 200.
That Battle of McCrag kit had no business having that good of a terrain.
Yes, agreed.
So
really?
Crash.
And it was nuts that it was $50 when it came out.
Yeah. But all of their old sets used to have cool terrain. That was standout. But anytime you used to buy it, when I got into it, every box set had some cool terrain in it.
Which I think as Heresy players, we're trading that for more models. Because if you look at Betrayal of Calth, they gave us those cut out board games at the time. I bought 3 Betrayal of Calth when they came out because I got a great deal on it. But those boards that came with it kind of ended up being wasteful cardboard at a lot of the time. But the models I needed so badly, I think we're trading out a lot of that mentality of getting terrain with ours, because like if you look at Kill Team, like the new Kill Team that just got shown at Adepticon a couple days ago, like it's coming out with like those little, like pods or something like that. Like
Yeah.
I don't think they personally look great for my taste in 40K, but I think those kits are definitely emphasizing a lot more terrain. But
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's actually the one thing I do like about Kill. I don't play Kill Team. I do have some Carskin models that I painted up as a quick favor to a friend to help him with the tournament, but I'm really sad we don't have something more similar to that. Like if we could just get some versus boxes, like for example, the one that I liked the most was the when they did the Banshee release with Jane Czar versus the Dark Eldar.
right.
That set was really cool, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome!" And then it's like, "Oh, it's just the models, no terrain, nothing." I'm like, "This would have been a really good opportunity to do some terrain with that." And I know it's probably not doable with Heresy boxes just because of the nature of what we're getting with it, especially considering we treat our Space Marines more like guardsmen at times. Take 20-man tactical squads. Will they survive? Maybe.
Probably not.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to just like they're forcing the community into 3D printing because they're not giving us any other options. I mean, when I first went into Kill Team, like I bought the Kill Team starter set, and like what was cool about it is it's 2 full armies and a board and like all the terrain you need. And it was like you could legit just have that set and play a bunch of Kill Team. And like with Heresy, it's like if you don't have, I mean, I think most people at this point, you have a local gaming store. We can go, we have our gaming stores we can go to and use their terrain. But if you don't have that, or if it's not that close to you, or you want to try, doing your own stuff, like it's a struggle. Like you have to be creative about ways to get terrain and build terrain. So
No,
Yep.
yeah, I do agree with that. I remember back in, I think it was like 5th or 6th edition, I went through a phase of I can build terrain, and my friend still has a giant like factory I built that was a hobcodge of like mangled pieces of styrofoam like glued together with some soda cans on top to be
Right.
smokestacks.
Smokestacks, and then you do
Yeah.
like some like cardboard to be the roof.
Yeah, and the thing is, it is the literally legitimately the coolest piece of terrain that anyone ever had, because everyone loved it, everyone used it at the shop, and no one will ever let me down that I made that, because like, look what we found in the garage, and I'm like, God, please throw that away. That thing is disgustingly awful. I didn't even paint the entire thing. There's like points of like white styrofoam sticking out from corners, and I'm like, please just throw it away. And they're like, no, it's legacy for our group. We're keeping it. It makes me feel bad every time I see it. I'm like, no, please.
Hey, it only gets better. I mean, like I was joking with my roommate who got me into it, and I we've been playing together for about 10 years now. And like I remember at one point in time, like when we were in college, he bought like these children's blocks that we were using to just represent our basic terrain. Like we were playing on the floor, like and like, but still, it was like I remember that game so vividly still because it was one of my first, and I remember how amazing we made it. And it just grows over time, and that's why like I've gotten into Heresy a lot more, because it does focus, I think, a little bit more on the narrative and the terrain and the setting, and I'm hopeful that we get more of that stuff as we go.
because that's a big point where it's like, yeah, 40K has that like MDF crappy looking terrain, and it's like it's serviceable, you're getting something out of it. But when you have like again in Heresy, we're talking about having everyone has painted armies and putting a lot of effort into it. We have these really cool painted armies on the table, and then these just like blocks that they're like it kind of takes you out of the narrative of it. You want the terrain to look as good as your army to like maintain like the narrative feel.
I mostly agree with that the MDF terrain is a little bit lackluster, but some of the stuff out there that isn't from Frontline, and some of the stuff that is Frontline, like their pre-painted stuff, looks really great. I don't know if you guys have heard of Death Ray Designs. They do a lot of MDF stuff. They have like a Zone Mortalis looking stuff, and it looks amazing when it's painted. It looks a little boring just plain, and I've seen some photos of people painting it up. It does look a little boring, but once it's painted up, you get some color on there, and you start really getting washes into it to get those details popping out. It does look really good, honestly. So I don't think we can really bash MDF terrain all that much. I think it's just you got to find the right person who's making it.
Definitely. And I'm not trying to disparage them at all. It's just, it's just trying to find stuff that doesn't look so stock standard all the time.
Yeah. And I
More
think
to
that like
come.
we can, because we recently had an event like a month or so ago, and I think this all kind of segues back into being like, I think one of the coolest things about our event is that we took a store who has nice terrain, and I don't want to speak poorly of their terrain, but we, among borrowing all this cool terrain, like really made like this event. You're like, you come to this event because you want to see cool heresy terrain. You want to see that Downforge World Thunderhawk. You want to see the bunker.
Mhm.
You want to see all the cool stuff that kind of goes with it. And I think a big component of that, and like hosting your own event, is making sure that you got like really cool terrain that like I'm not going to go to the game store next week and see the same terrain pieces. I'm going to go like, wow, that's incredible. I've never seen that like built that way, or like this battlefield I get to like experience playing on it.
Yeah,
That I mean,
100%.
that's why you want to travel to events. I mean, my
Mhm.
goal for the coming year is to try to actually make it to some of the Horus Heresy events somewhere in the middle west / east coast, because I hear they got some things going on there. So I want to try to make it to one of those. I just got to
Yeah.
actually find out when it's happening and double check my schedule that I'm not busy with work.
Yeah,
Just-
same as the one. I'm trying to think about like if I can go to Atlanta or Adepticon, obviously in Chicago, because we're an LA based, SoCal community. But yeah, it's just like trying to expand our regional and kind of embrace. And I also think like, eventually I hope that LA becomes kind of a scene that we can kind of do our own heresy thing, because I feel like we're such a big hub that has a lot of players around here. It's just finding kind of the space to do it.
well,
Yeah,
not
and
just that. I
getting them
feel like
all.
well, say, Randy, you're gonna probably say it right now. We're kind of all spread across the Los Angeles, or not even Southern California in general. We're just kind of all
Yeah,
spread out, and it seems like every little pocket is hyper isolated from the rest. Like we can't,
yeah,
Mhm.
like 40K is pretty much taken over LA. I want to say as far as Games Workshop games go, and there's nothing really out here besides 40K and Kill Team and a little bit of Age of Sigmar. I think everything else seems to be kind of either at
Garage
one
Hammer.
specific shot or Garage Hammer. Yeah. And I feel like that's a shame, honestly, for the heresy community out here, because I know there's got to be at least 2-3 dozen players in LA alone, but I think again, we just all happen to be isolated from each other, and it doesn't help that we have to fight over traffic to get to each other.
And
And
then fight for boards to play, like tables to play on all the
don't
time.
Yeah.
okay, like you know what? Maybe a good time to mention, because I know we want to mention some of the shops we go to. Why don't we talk about some of the shops we go to? I know Randy wants to mention one, but I personally want to mention the place I go to for games, which was Santa Monica's Paper Heroes games. I haven't played Heresy there, but I love that place because I can play board games and card games there. Anybody else got a favorite shop here in LA that they have to go to?
Very cool.
I mean,
I
for
think a lot of
us,
us play at Geeky Tees,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and just to hype them up as well. Like what I'm hearing is this is what they've announced, is they're getting a new space that it's almost going to like double or triple their play amount of space as well. So like I think when that happens, like our heresy scene might be able
Yeah.
to expand pretty significantly.
yeah,
I think then it's just gonna like I'm personally I've been trying to think about like maybe like talking to the owner and kind of seeing like if I make terrain for heresy, can I like can the store keep it, and just to kind of improve its arsenal of things that people can play with while also giving me a little less stuff in my place.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I
Who
think
knows?
they'd be totally on board with that. And I
Right.
also, before I forget, like there's another group of gamers down in Gamers Haven, which is Colton, which is a little bit
Mhm.
south of us. That one of the guys down there, a buddy of ours, is bringing Horus Heresy for the first time to the Palm Springs Open. So if anybody's
Nice.
watching this in the area and wants to kind of get involved, that is the first weekend in August. So we'll put a link in the video description for that. I think the way it works is you buy, which I've never seen this before, but you buy a table. So I think like two people can go in on one table. And I guess that's your ticket to the event. Um, but it sounds like it should be pretty cool. Like again, it's one of those things where I think people are just gonna be bringing terrain, and
Mhm.
we made custom missions for our event last month, and I think we might be using some of those for Palm Springs. So if there's anybody who's playing and is a little bored of the same rulebook missions over and over again, that might be a nice excuse for you to come and try some new stuff out. And that's probably a good place for us to wrap up. I feel like this is running a little long.
A good first episode.
We're like
Yeah.
what, hour and a half, hour 45 into
Yeah,
this?
yeah, we're close to 2 hours now.
I told you we'd have 2 hours to talk
Oh
about.
yeah, I mean we could keep talking forever, but we don't want to run out of content for the next one.
Right.
So
No, it's a one and
Stay
done
tuned.
episode. It's like a movie.
yeah, 1 10-hour podcast. That's it.
We're gonna
So,
get all of our thoughts about heresy out forever in the 10 hours.
Until
No,
we're
it'll
brought.
be a yearly podcast, right?
Yeah.
so hopefully people are enjoying this and want to see more. Let us know in the comments. We have an Instagram account at Hammers and Dice. We also have a Facebook group, just Hammers and Dice. You can search that. And stay tuned for more heresy content. And I'm not sure how regularly we're going to be doing this, but hopefully we'll have one every couple weeks. So we'll keep you posted.
Great. And keep building the heresy community while we do it. I mean, like, I think the more we do this, the more we kind of stay into it.
That's right. Shout out to everyone else who's listening who's not in LA. If you're in your own area, whether that's the East Coast, West Coast, Middle Land. If you're in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, wherever you're listening to us, you should be growing your community, because that's what makes any war game great, as we all know. It's having a nice group of friends to actually play with, right?
Yeah, even if just playing games, guys, just go to a local store, get some games going. You don't have to set up events or demo days. I think just playing the game already, it's like, it's showing people, hey, there's people play this game and exists, and from there you can go from that. So it doesn't have to be too daunting. Just get some games out there.
Right.
Sure.
And like there's always the joke of like heresy is dead. Like it was the joke for forever for us, but like it really shows like, you keep these communities going for long enough, they'll like kind of take notice of you and kind of come back to it. And I think Old World was also a token of that as well. That Games Workshop is watching and seeing that there is a lot of love for this stuff. So we kind of keep up the interest, and I think they'll keep making stuff for us.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. All right. Take care, guys.
Cool.
We'll see you next time.
Ciao.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.